So now that we've dissected the specimen, let's look at all the parts walking through, starting with the digestive and respiratory systems. So with the digestive system, digestion begins in the mouth as you chew your food, swallow it through the buccal cavity, down the pharynx, and into the esophagus. Now the esophagus is deep to the trachea. It is here. It's a muscle using peristalsis to send food down past the thoracic cavity and into the stomach. Before we get too far in the digestive system, let's look at the respiratory system. You breathe through either your nose or your mouth, and air comes down through the trachea. This is the trachea here. It has kind of a bendy straw feel to it overall. It goes down into, branching into bronchioles that lead into the lungs. In the cat, the lungs are 3-lobed on either side, and they sit within the thoracic cavity. The thoracic cavity has multiple layers of, multiple tissue layers, such as the visceral, or the parietal pleura, the visceral pleura, and they come together and meet and then turn into the, and then form a double layer with the pericardium, the parietal pericardium and the visceral pericardium, and the pericardium surrounds the heart. The heart has multiple chambers. You have the atrium, which has the auricles here associated with it on either side, and then the meaty portion, which is the ventricle, which is used to pump the blood. We'll get more into the circulatory system in the next lab, or the next section of the lab. The thoracic cavity is defined posteriorly by the diaphragm, and there's this connective tissue that comes up from the diaphragm to the pericardium, which is the coronary ligament. Moving posterior to the diaphragm, we get into the abdominal cavity. And the abdominal cavity, we cut and reflected this open. You can see the parietal peritoneum lining that wall. Here is the diaphragm. The parietal peritoneum is continuing along this, and it meets from either side to form this ligament here. This is the falciform ligament connecting the liver to the body wall. That's consistent across all groups in comparative anatomy. The liver is this large structure, most anterior in the abdominal cavity, and nested within it is the gallbladder. The gallbladder. This is just a tiny view of the gallbladder. When you reflect the liver to look under it, the gallbladder is much larger. It's a sac-like structure holding all the bile that was produced in the liver. That bile flows down through the common bile duct, which is embedded in this connective tissue, and reaches to the first part of the small intestine, which is the duodenum. So remember, we talked about how the esophagus passes food down or dorsal to the remainder portion of the thoracic cavity and reaches into the stomach. Here you can see the esophagus emptying into the stomach. This is the body of the stomach. The stomach has folds in it, which are called rugae. You can cut this open and look inside to see these folds, which allow it to increase in capacity, increase surface area. The stomach has two curvatures. It's J-shaped, like this. So this is the greater curvature and the lesser curvature of the stomach. The connective tissue in the lesser curvature of the stomach is called the lesser omentum. The connective tissue following the greater curvature of the stomach is called the greater omentum. You can break those omental regions into two different areas. The gastrosplenic ligament, because this is the spleen, connects the stomach to the spleen. And then the greater omentum is the fat apron, which is embedded around the intestines of the cat. The esophagus leads into the stomach, where digestion, chemical processing starts. Then the chyme flows out of the stomach at the pyloric region. Here is the pyloric sphincter. It's a pinch in the shape of the stomach that then opens and closes, dumping chyme into the small intestine. The small intestine has three areas for you to know. The duodenum is the first part of the small intestine immediately after the stomach, and associated with it and the bile duct is the pancreas. The pancreas is its own organ with its own functions. It also extends down this way on the back of the stomach. This is going to produce digestive enzymes, which also dump into the duodenum. So generally, if you can see the pancreas, we'll consider that duodenum. This is something that needs to be determined histologically otherwise. The remainder of the small intestine for digestive processing is the jejunum. And within the jejunum, you can see this mesentery, capital M mesentery, with all of the arteries and vessels associated with it, providing blood flow, and this is where the nutrient transfers out of your gut and into your body. All of this is going to flow back up towards the liver through the hepatic portal vein, which we'll discuss in the next lab. The end of the small intestine is known as the jejunum. And you can identify the end of the small intestine as the small portion of the intestine. Intestine. There it is. The final part of the small intestine is the jejunum, or the ileum. The ileum terminates the small intestine. There's another sphincter here. And then the intestine becomes much larger in diameter, meaning that it's the large intestine. The cecum is blind-ended. It doesn't go anywhere. This is possibly a reservoir for other things, but it kind of has that hook over the small intestine. That's the cecum. When in place, the large intestine has three different portions to it: the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon. The descending colon terminates in the rectum and the posterior portion, and cat's void through the anus. The digestive and respiratory systems also include your urogenital system as well, which we'll discuss in the next video. We'll go ahead and do it because I think I have 2 minutes. There's also the urogenital system, which includes the kidneys, which are shown here. These are retroperitoneal. The peritoneum had to be cut open to expose the kidneys. And if you follow the kidneys posteriorly and get through this connective tissue here, you can expose the ureters, possibly. Probably should have done this before I started talking. There's the ureter. There it is. Maybe. There we go. For the urogenital system, the kidneys are retroperitoneal, so they're behind the peritoneal layer of the abdominal cavity. You'll have to cut through that peritoneal layer in order to expose the ureters, which are going to transport urine that's made in the kidney down to the urinary bladder here. The urinary bladder will void through the urethra. In a male, that's in the penis, and the female, it's its own separate opening. When you're dissecting out the ureter, you need to be sure not to break too many of the vessels, because you'll need to know those in the circulatory portion of the next lab. Finally, this is a female cat. This has a uterine horn, a uterus, a uterine horn, and ovaries that are all connected to the body wall through different connective tissues that you'll need to explore throughout the rest of the lecture, throughout the rest of the lab.